I never told my husband about my $2 million inheritance. He always treated me like a servant. I silently endured it for 20 years. And then he brought his mistress to our home. What I did next? I'm glad you're here with me. Please like and share this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I never imagined that keeping a secret could save my life. For 15 years, I lived in that two-story colonial house in suburban Texas, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, and playing the role of the perfect housewife. My husband, Desmond, never knew about the $2 million my grandmother left me when I was 33. I had my reasons for keeping it hidden, and those reasons became clearer with every passing year. Back then, when Grandma Rose passed away, Desmond and I had only been married for 5 years. We were young, supposedly in love, building our future together. But even then, I noticed small things, the way he'd make decisions without asking me, how he'd criticize my cooking if dinner wasn't ready exactly at 6 p.m., the condescending tone when he explained things I already knew. My mother always said, "Ruth, don't rush to share everything. A woman needs something of her own." I thought she was old-fashioned. Turns out she was right. I deposited that inheritance in a separate account my grandmother had helped me set up years before at a different bank across town. Desmond never asked about my errands there. Why would he? I was just his wife, running household tasks, nothing important. The money sat there quietly growing while I scrubbed his floors and ironed his shirts. The years passed like pages in a book I couldn't put down, even though I hated the story. Desmond climbed the corporate ladder at his accounting firm, earning more each year. But our life never really changed. We didn't take vacations I wanted. We didn't remodel the kitchen I cooked in. Every single day was about his needs, his career, his preferences. They filled every corner of our existence. And I was the backdrop, the supporting character in Desmond's life story. Was I unhappy? Sometimes. Was I aware of how small I'd become? Not really. It's strange how you can lose yourself one tiny compromise at a time, one dismissed opinion, one eye roll when you speak. By year 15, I'd stopped sharing my thoughts at dinner parties. By year 17, I'd stopped having thoughts worth sharing, or so I believed. Then came that Tuesday in March. I remember because it was trash day, and I just hauled the bins to the curb when I saw an unfamiliar silver BMW in our driveway. Not parked on the street, in our driveway, bold as brass. I walked back into the house through the kitchen door, wiping my hands on my apron, expecting maybe a colleague of Desmond's dropping by unexpectedly. What I found instead rewrote everything. Desmond was in our living room, the living room where we'd celebrated Christmases, where we'd hosted his boring work dinners, where I'd arranged flowers every week for 20 years. He was there with a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger, maybe 30, with carefully highlighted hair and a burgundy dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe. They weren't just talking. They were standing close, too close. And Desmond had his hand on her waist in a way he hadn't touched me in years. The intimacy of it, the casual ownership in that gesture, it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was established, comfortable, real. I must have made a sound because they both turned. The woman had the decency to look startled. Desmond looked annoyed. Not guilty, not apologetic. Annoyed that I'd interrupted. "Ruth," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "This is Tiffany. We have some business matters to discuss. Could you make us some coffee?" Could I make them coffee in my house? After walking in on my husband with another woman, he wanted me to serve them refreshments. The world tilted sideways for a moment. 20 years of small humiliations crystallized into one perfect sharp point of clarity. I looked at Tiffany, who was now smiling, actually smiling with a mixture of pity and triumph in her eyes. I looked at Desmond, who was already turning back to her, dismissing me, and I thought about the $2 million sitting in that account across town, the money he knew nothing about, the secret that was about to become my weapon. Of course, I heard myself say, my voice steady and distant, "I'll put the coffee on right away." I walked to the kitchen, my hands trembling only slightly. I stood in the kitchen measuring coffee grounds with mechanical precision, while my mind raced through 20 years of marriage like flipping through a photo album that suddenly made horrible sense. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? And how many times had I been this blind, this trusting, this pathetically domestic? The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I gripped the counter, forcing myself to breathe. Through the doorway, I could hear their voices, low, intimate, punctuated by Tiffany's laugh. That laugh, light and carefree, the sound of a woman who wasn't expected to clean up after herself or worry about whether the pot roast would be dry. What had I lost? The question hammered through my shock. I'd lost my career. I'd been a promising marketing executive myself, once before Desmond convinced me we didn't need two people chasing promotions. And wouldn't it be better if someone managed the home properly? I'd lost my friends gradually as Desmond found reasons why we couldn't attend their gatherings or why my book club night conflicted with his networking dinners. I'd lost my identity piece by piece until I was just Desmond's wife, the woman who kept his house and asked for nothing. And what had Desmond lost? Nothing. He'd gained everything. A clean house, home-cooked meals, a presentable spouse for company events, and apparently the freedom to parade his mistress through our living room while I made them coffee. The rage came then, cold and clarifying, not the hot, explosive anger that makes you scream and throw things. This was different. This was ice forming over a deep lake, hard and clear and dangerous to anyone who tried to walk on it. I arranged 3 cups on a tray with steady hands, added cream and sugar, found the good cookies I'd baked yesterday. For him, always for him. As I worked, a thought crystallized. Desmond didn't know about the money. That ignorance was power, the only power I'd had in years, and I'd kept it without even realizing I was protecting myself. What could $2 million buy? Freedom, certainly, but more than that, it could buy justice, revenge, maybe, or maybe just the life I should have been living all along. I carried the tray into the living room. They'd separated slightly, probably thinking they'd been subtle earlier. Tiffany was perched on my sofa, legs crossed elegantly, while Desmond stood by the window looking like a man who owned everything in sight. "Here we are," I said pleasantly, setting down the tray. "Fresh coffee. The cookies are chocolate chip. I just baked them yesterday." Tiffany's smile was saccharine. "How domestic of you." "Desmond told me you're quite the homemaker." "Has he?" I poured coffee with a steady hand. "How nice that you two have such detailed conversations." The barb landed, but lightly. Desmond frowned. "Ruth, Tiffany is a consultant on a project at the firm. We're discussing. I'm sure it's very important." I interrupted gently. "I'll leave you to it. I have errands to run anyway." That was true. I did have errands now, very specific ones. Desmond looked relieved. "Take your time. We'll be a while." I collected my purse and keys, walking past them with my head high. Neither of them knew they'd just handed me the final piece of information I needed. Desmond wasn't even trying to hide this anymore. That meant he felt secure, untouchable. That meant he thought I had no options. Men like Desmond always underestimated women like me. In the car, I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to pick it up. I had 3 calls to make, and I knew exactly who to contact first. Elaine Matthews. We'd been friends in college before Desmond gradually edged her out of my life, claiming her divorce made her toxic to be around. Elaine was a family law attorney now, one of the best in the state. We'd exchanged Christmas cards every year, mine always cheerful and impersonal, hers always with a handwritten note. Call me if you ever need anything. My finger hovered over her number. This was the point of no return. Once I made this call, once I set things in motion, there would be no going back to the comfortable numbness of my old life. I thought about Tiffany's triumphant smile, about Desmond's casual dismissal, about 15 years of making myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. I pressed dial. "Elaine," I said when she answered, "it's Ruth Brown. Remember when you said to call if I ever needed anything? I need something now. I need a divorce attorney, and I need someone Desmond won't see coming." There was a pause. Then Elaine's voice came through, sharp and alert. "I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. Don't say another word until you're in my office. Can you come now?" "I'm already driving," I said, and I was away from that house, away from that life, towards something I couldn't quite see yet, but knew was mine for the taking. Elaine's office was in a steel and glass building downtown, the kind of place I never went anymore. As I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. A 53-year-old woman in a plain cardigan and comfortable shoes, clutching a worn purse. I looked exactly like what I was, a housewife, harmless, invisible, perfect. Elaine stood when I entered her office, and I saw the shock flicker across her face before she controlled it. I must have looked worse than I thought. She came around her desk and pulled me into a hug that almost broke my careful composure. "Sit," she said firmly. "Talk." So I did. I told her everything. The years of casual dismissal, the gradual erosion of my identity, and finally today's humiliation. Elaine listened with the focused attention of a surgeon examining a patient, taking notes occasionally, but mostly just watching my face. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Okay, first question. Do you want to save this marriage?" "No." The word came out so quickly, so certainly that we both paused. I'd surprised myself, but it was true, utterly, completely true. I didn't want counseling or second chances. I wanted out. "Good," Elaine said, "because from what you're describing, Desmond is the type who will use therapy as another platform to explain why everything is your fault. Second question, assets. What are we working with?" This was the moment. I took a breath. "Desmond thinks we have about $400,000 in combined retirement accounts and maybe $60,000 in savings. Our house is worth approximately $550,000 with $300,000 left on the mortgage." Elaine was already calculating, her pen moving across paper. "So roughly $900,000 in marital assets minus the mortgage. That's not bad. You should expect close to half, maybe a bit more given the length of the marriage. And I stopped her. "I have $2 million he doesn't know about," I said quietly. Elaine's pen stopped. "What?" "My grandmother left it to me 5 years after we married. I never told him. It's in a separate account. Has been for 15 years. Elaine set down her pen very carefully. "Ruth, that's separate property if you inherited it before the marriage or kept it completely separate. But 15 years during the marriage. If there's been any commingling, there hasn't been, not a penny. Separate account, separate bank, never touched. My grandmother set it up specifically to stay separate." A slow smile spread across Elaine's face. "Your grandmother was a smart woman. Okay, this changes everything. With that safety net, we can play hardball." But here's the critical thing. Desmond cannot know about this money until the absolute last possible moment. If he finds out early, he'll claim you hid marital assets, and it gets messy. So what do? Elaine pulled out a fresh legal pad. We document everything. Every instance of infidelity you can prove. Every asset he might be hiding. Every penny he's spent on Tiffany. We build a case so airtight that when we finally strike, he has no room to maneuver. How's your memory? Can you recall specific incidents? I thought about 20 years of keeping my mouth shut, of noticing everything and saying nothing. Yes, I can recall. Start talking. Dates, times, details, everything. We worked for 2 hours. Elaine's assistant brought us coffee and sandwiches, which I barely touched. I talked until my throat was raw, pulling up memories I'd buried, expensive gifts that appeared and disappeared, unexplained late nights, credit card charges to restaurants I'd never been to. Elaine's face grew grimmer with each detail. He's been careful, she said, finally, but not careful enough. Men like Desmond get cocky. They think their wives aren't paying attention. But you were paying attention, weren't you, Ruth? Always, I said. I just didn't know what I was going to do with the information. Here's what happens next. Elaine said, you go home. You act normal. You play the perfect wife. Meanwhile, I'm going to hire a private investigator, the best one I know. We're going to document every interaction Desmond has with Tiffany, every hotel visit, every dinner, every gift. Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity still matters for spousal support and asset division, especially when there's financial component. Financial component. If he's spending marital money on her, and I guarantee he is, that's dissipation of marital assets, we can claim that money back in the settlement. The predatory gleam in Elaine's eyes matched something awakening inside me. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. This was about making Desmond understand that actions have consequences. How long will this take? I asked. Gathering evidence. 4 to 6 weeks. We need a pattern, not just one incident. Can you handle being in that house for 6 more weeks? I thought about my grandmother's money sitting safe and secret, about the future I was building with every minute in this office. I can handle anything for 6 weeks. Good. Because here's the thing, Ruth. Desmond is going to realize something's changed. You're going to seem different, even if you're trying to hide it. People always do once they've made the decision to leave. He might get suspicious. Let him, I said. Suspicious isn't the same as knowing. Elaine smiled. I'm going to enjoy this case. Now, let's talk about what you do if he confronts you. As she outlined strategies and contingencies, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Powerful. Not because I was going to hurt Desmond, though I wouldn't pretend that didn't bring some satisfaction, but because I was taking control of my own life again. I was done being invisible. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange double reality. On the surface, I was the same Ruth cooking Desmond's breakfast, doing his laundry, maintaining the fiction of our marriage. But underneath, I was someone else entirely. Someone watching, documenting, preparing. Elaine's private investigator, a woman named Kate Morgan, was worth every penny of her considerable fee. She followed Desmond with professional discretion, and her reports landed in my email every 3 days like clockwork. Lunch at Giovanni's with Tiffany, entering the Hilton at 2 p.m., emerging at 4:30 p.m., shopping at Tiffany's. A bracelet, $4,000. Definitely not for me, since I'd never seen it. I saved every report in a cloud folder Desmond couldn't access. I photographed credit card statements when they arrived. I recorded dates and times in a small notebook I kept in my car. I was building a case brick by brick, and it was almost satisfying how quickly the evidence accumulated. But Desmond wasn't stupid. On a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after my visit to Elaine's office, he came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Chicken marsala, his favorite, when he walked in and stood in the doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've been different lately," he said. My hand didn't shake as I sliced mushrooms. "Different? How?" "More, I don't know, distant." I allowed myself a small smile he couldn't see. "I'm standing right here, Desmond. How much closer can I be?" "That's not what I mean." He moved into the kitchen, and I felt his presence behind me. "Too close. You went out that day when Tiffany was here." "Where did you go?" "Errands," I said, rinsing the mushrooms. "The dry cleaners, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the usual places for 4 hours. So, he'd been tracking my time. Interesting. I had lunch with an old friend. Is that a problem? What friend?" His voice had an edge now. "Elaine Matthews from college. You remember her?" I felt him stiffen. He did remember her. The friend he'd spent years convincing me was a bad influence. "I thought you two had lost touch," he said. "We exchanged Christmas cards. I thought it would be nice to catch up." I turned to face him, knife still in hand, expression mild. "Is there a reason I shouldn't have lunch with an old friend? Desmond?" His eyes narrowed, calculating. He was trying to decide if I knew something, if I suspected something. The old Ruth would have rushed to reassure him, to smooth over his concerns. The new Ruth just looked at him calmly and waited. "Of course not," he said finally. "I was just surprised. That's all. You don't usually go out." "Maybe I should go out more often," I said lightly. It was nice to have adult conversation for a change. That struck a nerve. His face hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just an observation." I turned back to my cooking. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. He didn't move for a long moment, and I could feel his anger building like a pressure system before a storm. Then he left the kitchen without another word, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. That night, he didn't eat the dinner I'd prepared. He stayed in his study until late, and when he finally came to bed, he lay on his side, facing away from me, radiating hostility. The next day, Tiffany called. I answered the house phone. Desmond was at work and heard her voice honeyed and false. "Ruth, it's Tiffany from Desmond's firm." I remember I said pleasantly, "I wanted to apologize if my visit made you uncomfortable." Desmond explained that you can be sensitive about his professional relationships. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. She was testing me, trying to see if I'd accepted Desmond's narrative that I was the problem. "How thoughtful of you to call," I said, though I wasn't uncomfortable at all. "Why would I be? Please feel free to visit any time. I'll make sure to have coffee ready." There was a pause. She hadn't expected that response. "Oh, well, that's very understanding of you." "I'm a very understanding person," I said. "Desmond can confirm that." "Have a wonderful day, Tiffany." I hung up before she could respond and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. They were rattled. Good. But that evening, Desmond came home with a new strategy. He was charming at dinner, complimentary about the food, asking about my day in a way he hadn't in years. The sudden attention was jarring, calculated. He was trying to lull me back into complacency to convince me that nothing had changed. "I've been thinking," he said over dessert, "we should take a vacation, just the two of us. Maybe that cruise you mentioned wanting to take." I'd mentioned wanting to cruise to Alaska 7 years ago. He'd said it was a waste of money. "That's a lovely thought," I said carefully. "When were you thinking?" "Next month." I could arrange some time off. Next month. Right when Elaine expected to have all the evidence compiled. Right when I was planning to file for divorce. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. "Let me check my calendar," I said, knowing I'd find a polite way to decline. "That's very sweet of you to suggest it, Desmond." He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip just slightly too tight. "I know I haven't always been attentive, but you're my wife, Ruth. That means something to me." I looked into his eyes and saw calculation, not affection. He suspected something, and this was his way of keeping me close, of monitoring me. Or maybe, and this thought chilled me, he was planning something. A vacation could be an opportunity to make me look unstable, to set some narrative that would favor him in a divorce. It means something to me, too. I lied smoothly. "Let me think about it." That night, I emailed Elaine. "He knows something's different. Suggesting vacation next month. Advice." Her response came within an hour. "Don't go. Make excuses. And Ruth, be careful. Cornered men do unpredictable things. If you ever feel unsafe, you call me immediately, day or night." I looked at those words for a long time. If you ever feel unsafe. Was I unsafe? Desmond had never been physically violent, but there was violence in contempt, in dismissal, in parading another woman through your home. I realized I didn't actually know what Desmond was capable of when threatened. For the first time since starting this process, I felt a flicker of genuine fear. I took the next day off from my volunteer work at the library, a small rebellion Desmond probably wouldn't even notice, and drove to a bank in the next town over. I withdrew $10,000 in cash from my grandmother's account and hid it in a safety deposit box Elaine had helped me rent. Emergency money in case I needed to leave quickly. Then I went home, made dinner, and smiled at my husband across the table. Just 3 more weeks of evidence gathering. I could last 3 more weeks. I had to. The gifts started arriving 3 days later. First, it was flowers. 2 dozen red roses delivered to the house with a card in Desmond's handwriting. To my beautiful wife. I arranged them in a vase and said nothing. The next day, a jewelry box appeared on my pillow. Inside was a pearl necklace, delicate and expensive. The kind of thing I might have treasured 15 years ago. Now it just looked like guilt or strategy. "Do you like them?" Desmond asked that evening, gesturing to the pearls I'd left in their box, on the dresser. "They're lovely," I said neutrally. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to give my wife a gift?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was watching me carefully, gauging my reaction. "I suppose not," I said. "Thank you, Desmond." He frowned slightly. I could see he'd expected more enthusiasm, more gratitude, more of the old Ruth, who would have been thrilled by this attention. When I simply returned to folding laundry, he left the room with barely concealed frustration. The courtship continued throughout the week, compliments at breakfast, suggestions of date nights, an expensive dinner reservation at the French restaurant I'd mentioned wanting to try years ago. He was trying to buy me back, or at least by my complacency. Every gesture screamed, "Please don't look too closely at what I've been doing," but I was done being managed. On Friday, Tiffany appeared at the house again. This time, she rang the doorbell like a proper visitor instead of walking in like she belonged here. When I opened the door, she was holding a bottle of wine and wearing what I recognized as an expensive attempt at casual elegance. "Ruth," she said brightly, "I hope I'm not intruding. Desmond mentioned you've been feeling a bit under the weather, and I thought some company might cheer you up." I hadn't been under the weather. This was Desmond's doing, setting up this visit, probably thinking that if Tiffany and I became friendly, I'd be less likely to see her as a threat. The psychology was laughably transparent. "How thoughtful," I said, stepping aside. "Please come in." Her confidence faltered slightly. She'd expected resistance. "Oh, well, wonderful. I brought a Pinot Noir. Desmond mentioned you like wine." Desmond had never noticed what I liked or didn't like in 20 years, but I simply smiled and led her to the living room. Would you like some cheese to go with that? I just bought some very nice brie. That would be lovely. I left her in the living room and went to the kitchen, where I texted Elaine. Tiffany is here playing nice. This is her audition as the friendly other woman. Elaine's response was immediate. Perfect. Let her talk. They always say too much when they think they're winning. I returned with cheese, crackers, and 2 wine glasses. Tiffany had made herself comfortable on the sofa, and she smiled as I poured. I have to say, Ruth, you have such a lovely home. Desmond is lucky to have someone who keeps things so beautiful. Thank you, I said, sitting across from her. Though I imagine you have your own home to maintain. A tiny flicker of something crossed her face. Oh, I'm in a condo. Much easier. No yard work, no constant upkeep. Very modern and convenient. How sensible, I said. And you work with Desmond at the firm. Consultant, she said quickly. I specialize in helping companies streamline their accounting processes. That's how Desmond and I met. I was brought in to evaluate their systems. And did you evaluate their systems? She laughed a touch nervously. Among other things, Desmond has been very helpful in showing me around the city. I'm relatively new to the area. How kind of him, I said, sipping my wine. He's always been generous with his time for work colleagues. We talked for another 20 minutes, a bizarre dance of pleasantries and subtext. Tiffany was trying to establish herself as non-threatening, as someone I should accept in Desmond's life. She mentioned how much Desmond talked about me, how devoted he was, how lucky they both were to have me as such an understanding friend. When she finally left, promising we should do this again soon, I closed the door and leaned against it. My phone buzzed. Elaine. Well, I typed back. She called me an understanding friend. They think I'm neutered. This is their victory lap. Good. Let them think that. Kate got photos of them at the Hilton again today. He's getting sloppy. I walked to the kitchen and poured the rest of Tiffany's wine down the sink. The manipulation attempt had been almost insulting in its obviousness. Did they really think I was that naive, that I'd befriend my husband's mistress, and everyone could live happily in this bizarre arrangement? But I knew women who'd accepted less than they deserved because it was easier than fighting, safer than being alone. The old Ruth might have been one of them. The new Ruth had $2 million and a very good lawyer. That evening, I drove to the community center where I'd volunteered before Desmond convinced me I was too busy for outside activities. Susan Park, who ran the literacy program, nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me walk in. Ruth Brown, my God, it's been 8 years? 9, I said. I'm sorry I disappeared. Susan pulled me into her office, and something about her warm, direct manner made the words spill out. Not everything. I wasn't ready to share the full story, but enough about feeling isolated, about wanting to reconnect with my old life. You know what I thought when you stopped coming? Susan said, I thought Desmond finally succeeded in keeping her home. He never liked you having your own things, did he? The blunt assessment stunned me. You could tell? Honey, everyone could tell. He'd show up to pick you up early, looking impatient. He'd make little comments about how you were needed at home. It was textbook controlling behavior. But you can't save someone who isn't ready to leave. I'm ready now, I said. Susan studied me for a long moment, then squeezed my hand. Good. So what do you need? A reason to leave the house regularly. Something that looks innocent but gives me freedom. She smiled slowly. The literacy program meets Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m. We'd love to have you back. And if you happen to have other appointments before or after those meetings, well, that's your business, isn't it? I felt something loosen in my chest. The relief of having an ally, someone who saw me clearly and didn't judge me for taking so long to act. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you meet our new students. They're going to work you hard." She paused. "Ruth, whatever you're planning, be careful. Men like Desmond don't like losing control." "I'm being very careful," I assured her. But as I drove home, I wondered if careful was enough. Desmond and Tiffany had shown their hand today. They wanted me compliant, willing to look the other way. And when I inevitably wasn't, what would they do then? They came together on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after I'd started gathering evidence. I was in the garden pruning roses, one of the few activities Desmond never interfered with because he considered it beneath his notice when I heard the car in the driveway. Desmond and Tiffany emerged together, and there was something different about them today. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They walked up the path side by side, Desmond's hand briefly touching her back, a gesture of casual ownership that told me everything about where this was headed. "Ruth," Desmond called out, his tone falsely cheerful. "Come inside. We need to talk." A command, not a request. I set down my pruning shears carefully, removed my gardening gloves, and followed them into my own house. They were already in the living room, sitting together on the sofa like a united front. Desmond gestured to the armchair opposite the position of someone being summoned for a meeting. I remained standing. "We've been doing a lot of thinking." Desmond began. "And we've come to share something important with you. Something we hope you'll understand." I said nothing, just waited. Tiffany took his hand. A gesture so theatrical, I almost laughed. "Ruth, I want you to know that neither of us planned for this to happen. Desmond and I tried to fight our feelings, but sometimes love is bigger than social conventions." Love. She was calling it love. "Desmond and I want to be together," she continued, her voice dripping with false compassion. "But we also respect you and everything you've built here. We don't want anyone to be hurt unnecessarily." "How considerate," I said flatly. Desmond leaned forward. "Ruth, you're a good woman. You've been a good wife, but we both know our marriage has been stale for years. We've grown apart. This doesn't have to be ugly or difficult. We can handle this like mature adults." "Handle what exactly?" I asked. "A divorce," he said. "An amicable, civilized divorce. You can stay in the house for now. We'll work out the details. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. You won't have to worry." "How generous," I said. Tiffany jumped in again. "We could even stay friends, Ruth. I know that might sound strange, but I've grown quite fond of you. You're such a gracious woman. I'd hate for this to create unnecessary hostility." The audacity was breathtaking. They were asking me to step aside gracefully to make their affair easy for them to prioritize their comfort over my own dignity. "And if I don't agree to this amicable arrangement," I asked. Desmond's expression hardened. "Then things could get complicated, difficult. Lawyers, drawn-out proceedings, public embarrassment. You really want everyone at the church, at your volunteer organizations, knowing your personal business, knowing your husband left you." There it was, the threat underneath the false kindness. "And financially," Tiffany added, her mask slipping slightly. "Divorce can be very expensive for everyone involved. Legal fees, asset division. It could eat up everything you've saved. Wouldn't it be better to settle this quietly? You'd have the house, a reasonable monthly support payment. You could live comfortably." They'd already discussed this, planned it probably with a lawyer of their own. They wanted me to accept a quick settlement before I could mount a proper defense to walk away with whatever scraps they deemed appropriate, while Desmond kept the bulk of our assets and his reputation intact. I looked at them, Desmond with his entitled smirk, Tiffany with her calculated sympathy, and felt something cold and powerful settle over me like armor. "No," I said simply, Desmond blinked. No, no, I won't make this easy for you. No, I won't step aside gracefully. No, I won't accept whatever arrangement you've decided is fair. I smiled, and I saw both of them flinch slightly. If you want a divorce, Desmond, you can have one, but it will be on my terms, not yours. He stood, anger replacing the false pleasantness. Ruth, don't be stupid about this. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know every asset we have, every account, every investment. I've been managing our finances for 20 years. You think you can challenge me? You don't even know what we're worth, don't I? I said softly. Something in my tone made him pause. Tiffany was watching me now with narrowed eyes, her friendly mask completely gone. What have you done? Desmond demanded. Nothing yet, I said. But I will. You want a war, Desmond? You'll get one. And when it's over, you'll wish you'd treated me better for the last 20 years. You're threatening me? He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate me. You think you can threaten me? I'll destroy you in court. I'll prove you're controlling, vindictive. I'll make sure you get nothing. Get out of my house. I said clearly. This is my house, he shouted. Actually, I said, it's marital property, which means half of it is mine, and right now I'm asking you to leave. Or should I call the police and tell them you're harassing me? Tiffany grabbed his arm. Desmond, let's go. This isn't productive, but he was too angry now, too shocked that I'd stood up to him. You'll regret this, Ruth. I gave you an easy way out, and you threw it back in my face. Fine, we do this the hard way, but don't come crying to me when you're living in some shitty apartment because you couldn't afford a decent lawyer. He stormed out, Tiffany hurrying after him. I watched through the window as they got in the car, Desmond gesticulating angrily while Tiffany tried to calm him down. They drove off with a screech of tires that probably left marks on the driveway. I stood in my silent house, my heart pounding, my hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. They'd meant to intimidate me into submission, and instead I declared war. The fear came then real and visceral. Desmond was right that he knew our finances. He had connections, resources, 20 years of controlling everything. What if I'd miscalculated? What if my $2 million wasn't enough? I took out my phone and called Elaine. They came to the house. I said when she answered. Desmond and Tiffany together. They demanded an amicable divorce on their terms. I said no. Good, Elaine said firmly. How did they react? Threats. Desmond said he'd destroy me in court, prove I'm unstable. He's angry, Elaine. Really angry. Even better. Angry people make mistakes. Listen to me, Ruth. You did exactly right. Never let them think you'll fold. We have 3 weeks of evidence now, and it's damning. Kate photographed them checking into the Hilton 6 times, eating at expensive restaurants, shopping together. He spent over $30,000 of marital funds on this affair. $30,000. I felt sick. $30,000. We can prove more. And here's the beautiful part. Every dollar he spent on Tiffany is a dollar he has to pay back in the settlement. We're going to file next week. We have everything we need. Next week. My voice shook. But you said I said 4 to 6 weeks, and we're at 3. But Desmond just showed his hand. He's planning to file, first, probably tomorrow morning to get ahead of you. We need to beat him to it. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Yes. I said, bring everything, every document, every bank statement, every piece of information you have. We're going scorched earth, Ruth. By the time we're done, Desmond is going to regret every casual cruelty, every dismissal, every time he made you feel small. After we hung up, I walked through the house slowly, looking at 20 years of my life. The photos on the walls showing a marriage that had died years ago. The furniture I'd chosen trying to make this place a home. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for a man who'd never once thanked me. Tomorrow it would all change. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The courthouse on a Monday morning was busy with the ordinary machinery of justice. People fighting over parking tickets, custody arrangements, small claims. Elaine and I had a 9 a.m. appointment with the clerk's office. By 9:15 a.m., my divorce petition was filed. Desmond didn't know yet. He was at work, probably planning his own filing, confident that he'd control this process like he controlled everything else. But I'd beaten him to it, and the advantage was now mine. He'll be served at his office this afternoon. Elaine said as we left the courthouse. I've arranged for a process server who specializes in workplace delivery, maximum visibility. You're enjoying this, I observed, immensely, she admitted. I've been watching men like Desmond destroy women's lives for years. It's deeply satisfying when one of you fights back. My phone rang at 2:47 p.m., Desmond's name on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again, immediately and again. By the fourth call, I answered, "What the hell have you done?" His voice was so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I filed for divorce, Desmond." "I thought that's what you wanted. Wasn't that what yesterday's visit was about? You had me served at work at my office. Do you have any idea how humiliating everyone saw my partners?" "Humiliating?" I repeated slowly, "like having your mistress in our living room while I made you coffee." Silence. "Then we need to talk now. I'm coming home." "I won't be there." I said I'm staying with a friend for a few days. "My attorney will contact yours to arrange property access times." "Your attorney, Elaine Marsh, that bitter divorcee. Ruth, she's filling your head with poison." "My attorney," I continued calmly, "will also be sending your attorney documentation of your affair, including photographs, credit card receipts, and a full accounting of the marital funds you've dissipated on Tiffany. We're seeking full reimbursement plus additional compensation." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower, more controlled, dangerous. "You've been spying on me, protecting my interests. There's a difference. You vindictive, I offered you a clean exit, and I hung up." My hands were shaking, but with adrenaline, not fear. Elaine had warned me this call would come, had coached me on staying calm, on saying only what needed to be said. Don't engage. Don't defend. Don't apologize. The second call came an hour later from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Brown, this is Martin Foster. I'm an attorney representing Desmond Brown in the matter of your divorce." "I see." I said you should direct all communication to my attorney, Elaine Matthews. Of course. But I wanted to reach out personally. You're a woman. I understand emotions are running high, but perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss settlement terms before this gets unnecessarily adversarial. We're past that point, Mr. Foster. Mrs. Brown, I'll be frank. Your attorney is known for being aggressive, hostile, even. These cases can drag on for years and cost both parties enormous sums. My client is willing to be very generous if we can resolve this quickly and quietly. How generous? I asked, curious. The house, of course. $200,000 in cash and $1,500 a month in support for 5 years. That's quite fair, given the circumstances. I did the math. The house minus the mortgage was worth about $250,000. $200,000 cash, $90,000 in support over 5 years. Just under $500,000 total, when the marital estate was worth at least $900,000. Tell Desmond, I'll see him in court, I said, and hung up. The real confrontation came on Friday during the first settlement conference. We sat in a conference room at Elaine's firm. Desmond and Martin Foster on one side, Elaine and I on the other. This was the first time Desmond and I had been in the same room since the courthouse filing, and the hatred in his eyes was palpable. Let's try to keep this civil, Martin began. Elaine opened her briefcase. Certainly, let's start with this. She slid a thick folder across the table. Photographic evidence of Mr. Brown's affair with Tiffany Wright, including dates, times, and locations of their encounters over a 3-month period. Desmond's face went white as Martin opened the folder. Page 15, Elaine continued conversationally, shows them entering the Hilton on 6 separate occasions. Page 23 details approximately $32,000 in marital funds spent on gifts, meals, and hotel rooms. This is entrapment, Desmond started. This is evidence, Elaine cut him off. Evidence that will be presented in court if necessary. Evidence that shows Mr. Brown has been conducting an affair for at least 3 months, possibly longer, and dissipating marital assets to support that affair. Martin was scanning the documents, his expression growing grimmer. Desmond, we need to talk privately. No, Desmond said. No, this is Ruth. Please, we can work this out. I made mistakes. I admit that. But this, you're destroying everything. You destroyed it, I said quietly. Years ago, I'm just making it official. You want money? Fine. I'll give you more money. But these pictures, this evidence, if this gets out, gets out. Where? I asked. To your partners, your clients, everyone who already saw you get served. He lunged forward, and Elaine was on her feet, immediately, her voice sharp. Mr. Brown, sit down now. Martin grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Desmond, for God's sake, she's been planning this. Desmond said, staring at me with something like horror. This whole time, she's been. You were always so quiet, so passive. Where did this come from? I learned from the best. I said, you taught me how to hide what I really think, how to smile while planning my next move. You taught me patience. I'm just using those lessons now. Elaine pulled out another folder. We prepared to offer the following settlement. Mrs. Brown receives the house free and clear with Mr. Brown, assuming the full mortgage, half of all retirement accounts, half of all savings, full reimbursement of the $32,000 dissipated on the affair, plus an additional $50,000 in compensatory damages. Martin was calculating. That's more than half the estate. It's justice for 20 years of emotional abuse and infidelity. Elaine said flatly, take it or we go to trial. And I promise you, Mr. Foster, your client's reputation will be in tatters by the time I'm done presenting evidence. Desmond looked broken now, small in his chair. You can't do this, Ruth. That's not who you are. You're not cruel. No, I agreed. I'm not cruel. But I'm also not a doormat anymore. Sign the settlement, Desmond. Move on with Tiffany. Build your new life. But you'll do it on fair terms, not on your terms. He looked at Martin, who nodded slowly. It's a reasonable offer given the evidence. Better than you'd get at trial. Fine, Desmond whispered. Fine, I'll sign. The triumph, I felt, wasn't the hot satisfaction I'd imagined. It was cold and clean and final. This marriage was over. My old life was over, and I was free. The settlement took 6 weeks to finalize. 6 weeks of Desmond's desperate calls and Martin Foster's negotiation attempts. But Elaine was relentless, and the evidence was irrefutable. In the end, Desmond signed. I got the house with no mortgage. Desmond had to pay it off completely. I got half of his retirement account. I got full reimbursement of the $32,000 he'd spent on Tiffany, plus $50,000 in compensatory damages. And I got 7 years of alimony at $3,000 a month. The total settlement was approximately $700,000. But the real victory wasn't in the money. It was in watching his world unravel. Desmond's partners were unimpressed by the scandal. 3 months after our divorce finalized, Desmond was encouraged to pursue other opportunities. Tiffany left him 2 weeks after that. Apparently, she'd assumed she was getting a successful accountant with money and status. When he became an unemployed ex-husband, paying substantial alimony, she lost interest remarkably quickly. 1 year later, my life had transformed completely. I woke up in my sun-filled bedroom and made coffee exactly the way I liked it. The house I'd renovated was bright and welcoming, filled with colors I chose. I'd gotten certified as an accountant again and found work at a small firm helping women through divorce understand their finances. I had purpose again, value beyond what I could cook or clean. My social life had expanded beyond anything I'd experienced in marriage. I'd reconnected with old friends, joined new groups, started actually living, and I'd met James, a retired teacher, kind and attentive, who treated me like an equal. Meanwhile, Desmond worked as a bookkeeper at a car dealership, making a quarter of his former salary. He tried to get the alimony reduced. The judge denied it, saying he'd created his own circumstances through his choices. Tiffany engaged to a doctor, living the life she'd wanted, just with someone else's money. "How does it feel?" Elaine asked during lunch, knowing they both got what they deserved. "Like justice," I said, "but also like freedom. I don't think about them anymore." And I didn't. Desmond had controlled 20 years of my existence, but with my grandmother's $2 million still sitting safely, he'd never learned about it. And my settlement, I had complete financial security. More importantly, I had myself back. I saw Desmond once at a grocery store, looking tired, buying frozen dinners alone. He saw me too, open his mouth like he wanted to speak. I turned and walked away. That evening, I sat in my renovated living room with wine, reviewing a case for work. Music played softly. My music, my choice. The house was peaceful, not oppressive. I thought about my grandmother often. She'd known I'd need that money, not just as financial security, but as the foundation for courage. I'd learned that secrets can be power, that patience is a weapon, that the woman who seems weakest might be gathering her strength for years. I was 54 years old, and I'd never been happier. The rest of my life was mine, and I intended to live every single one of those years on my own terms. So, what did I learn from all this? That secrets can be power, that patience is a weapon, that the woman who seems weakest might be gathering her strength for years. I learned that you're never too old to start over, never too far gone to reclaim yourself, never too broken to rebuild. But mostly I learned this. The people who dismiss you, who take you for granted, who treat you like you don't matter, they're making a dangerous mistake, because one day you'll stop accepting their version of your story and start writing your own. What would you have done in my place? Thank you for listening.